welcome back. And if you've just joined us, you are watching Moving Forward, a production of the Bain Grandstand Advancement Association. And on this program this evening, we are discussing majority rule. And just before the break, Freddie opened up a topic that we must expand on a little bit. So we're going to give Freddie and Chris the floor.
Well, Dr. Moss, it's just the point that I'm trying to make where you know, I've heard some folk calling into some of these talk shows and some of the guests even talking about why do you really want to stir up that race issue in the Bahamas? We are beyond those years. I say no. We must talk about those histories. We must make people understand why things happened the way they did, because these were the ugly years of our country where racism was rampant in this country. You couldn't go into certain banks. You couldn't go into certain businesses. And I hear people calling and say, well, you know, that's not the way. Maybe that's not the way it is now, but there's still some insidious racism in this country happening today. There are people who are trying to keep Bahamians of certain beaches. There are certain kinds of special interests who are trying to hog all the business in the transportation industry. We have some issues right now done at the airport with some of our cab drivers. That was the same issue that happened 60 years ago, Dr. Curry. And I'm saying unless we expose these insidious, ugly aspects of our history so that we can wipe them out and we can face them and teach the truth about them so that our people can know that the Bahamas was a place where we had these problems, but we've overcome them to a certain degree, but they still exist. I vividly remember one about 10, 15 years ago, KTV, you were aware of this. We approached one minister of education and we insisted that we had a problem with not teaching African/Bahamian history in the schools on a mandatory basis. The retort was, why do you want to teach racism in our schools? Well, why do we want to teach this in our schools, Dr. Curry? Yeah. You're in charge of the history department at the University of the Bahamas, and when we speak of these issues, I get from you that it is ultimately very important for us to know our past, because if you don't know the lessons of the past, you will continue to repeat the class.
Let me respond, because I think you've made such a wonderful
Frederick
point.
Douglass.
Yes. Let me just say that in the United States, about 2 decades ago, there was a cultural war that took place between Dick Cheney. Remember, he was vice president at the time. His wife, Lynn Cheney, was an academic. She was involved in rewriting the curriculum in Texas, I believe, and a couple other states. And she believed that they had to whitewash, pun intended, U.S. history is to take out all the ugly parts. You know, let's move out the immigrant experience. Let's take out all this stuff about slavery. That's not. Let's have a history that's palpable and easy to digest. Yeah. Yes. She was challenged by one of my favorite historians, a progressive historian by the name of Gary Nash out of UCLA. Yes. Gary Nash made a very poignant argument. He said, we do not want to perfume the past. What you want to do is you want to tell history, both the triumphs and the tragedies. You need to talk about the warts, the ugliness in history, because when you talk about them, you expose them. You allow for healing to take place. That's right. If you don't talk about that stuff, there's no way that you can move forward and progress. Right. So you have to take the good and the bad. And I say that for us here in the Bahamas. We don't want a sanitized history. No. We want to know about all of the things that have happened, for better or for worse. And until we do that, we cannot have reconciliation. We cannot have recovery. We cannot have repair or reparations. We need to deal with the realities of our past. And I'm saying that as a Conky Joe White Bahamian, we need to do that. And let me say one last thing.
Yes.
I love what you were saying earlier about featuring individuals who are not getting the limelight. I want to talk for just a moment about a laborer, Leonard Storr. Yes. Burma Road Ride, he went into the Pleasantville company's company house, so to speak. And he emerged with a cut over his eye. We're not so sure what happened inside the building with him and management. But when he came out and when people saw that he had come out and this cut was above his eye, that incited the crowd because they realized this man was willing to do whatever it took to get his rights. You know what people wanted in 42? They wanted bread on the table.
Yes.
When you hear the slogans as they marched to Bay Street, it was all about workers' rights. It wasn't about some kind of abstract theory. It was about, I need equal pay for equal work, and I need bread on the table to feed my family. That is what they were interested in. And I'm going to say that today in the Bahamas, that as we commemorate the 60th anniversary of the general strike, that is what laborers in the Bahamas want today. Fair wages, equitable working conditions, and the same rights that are given to any foreign national who comes into the country.
And that's what we're still fighting for in this country. I heard the statistics on one of the talk shows just yesterday. They said there is a particular company where 70 of their foreign expatriates is making the equivalent of over 2,000 Bahamians. 70.
That is startling.
The equivalent, and this is a statistic that, and I can't remember exactly which company, so I wouldn't name the company, but I said, that is incredible. 60 years ago, the riot, the strike came about as a result of a foreign company paying Bahamians 1/2 the wage of the foreign, and not that the foreign company didn't want to pay the Bahamian the same wage, you know.
No,
but those who in power felt that you cannot pay the Bahamians the same that you're paying the foreigners, because when you all go, when you they spoil them.
That was the 42 riot. Now,
the 42
now in 58,
the 42 riot. I'm sorry, you're absolutely correct.
The 58 strike. There was the other inequity. Here you had the Bahamian government gives a monopoly license to white taxi cab drivers to transport tourists from the newly opened airport to the hotels, completely excluding black taxi cab drivers from any business they could operate out of the airport.
And the taxi cab drivers tell me even today they haven't that kind of challenge, because there are certain special interest groups who want to bring the tour companies now to transport those persons from the airport to their respective hotels, bypassing the cab drivers as we speak today.
So the independent individual taxi drivers left out of the picture.
That is correct.
So what we're seeing in our country today, as we try to tie these things together, is that we still have barriers of exclusion.
Yes.
A lot of them are mechanisms of socioeconomic inequalities.
Yes.
Whether it's the tuition to go to an IB school that is $2,000 a semester, leaving most working class blacks out of that.
Out of it.
Can't afford it.
Or in certain clubs on Eastern Road, that by the economics of the cost involved in membership, you are naturally creating de facto racism because you have a barrier of exclusion.
Yes, you know, one of the problems, there are several problems that are causing us to stagnate just where we are in this whole discussion. Each year around Majority Rule Day, we have this kind of format. People get together, whether it's on talk shows and on television, and we repeat a narrative that we have bought. And then once Majority Rule Day is over, then everything is rest aside until the following year. Well, anyone who expects that to continue this time will be disappointed, because we already have plans to continue the discussion, not so much about Majority Rule Day, but to inform the Bahamian people of their history. You see, it's important because, as I said earlier, prior to 1783, I think, when the Loyalists arrived, the European stock, that's the white people, were the dominant race in the Bahamas. Their slaves basically were a part of their household almost. They lived on the premises of the masters, and they were handled as inferiors, but still not harshly segregated.
And that is true. But CB, isn't it interesting though, that the reason why they came here, they were fleeing, they were running away from America, the Loyalists, after they were defeated, right? To run to this country, the Lutheran adventurers. And then when they came, they brought with them, they bring in the slaves, the indentured servants, to oppress people. But they were seeking freedom, but yet when they got here, they oppressed those under the name of religion.
Largely so. But
isn't that amazing?
Our people need to know that sort of institutionalized slavery did not occur at the beginning of the experience of the white and black people in this country. Residential segregation was not effective until after 1783, because when the Loyalists came and they brought thousands of their slaves, the white population became alarmed. And they said, wait a minute, these people are going to outnumber us. And so they rushed into Parliament. And Bahamians need to know this. They rushed into Parliament.
For the legislation?
And they passed legislation.
There you go,
and that was the beginning now of residential segregation and institutionalized slavery, because the legislation said that blacks can no longer live within the city of Nassau. They had to live outside the city of Nassau. Blacks could not be up and about after sundown without a piece of paper.
There is still some legislation in certain areas on Love Beach that says very clearly,
I didn't know
very clearly, that no property should be sold to Negroes.
Are you aware of that?
I am.
There's documentation.
I'm also going to say this. I want you to know about.
Yes, sir.
1723, our first slave codes were passed. In those slave codes, it says that enslaved persons could not meet at night in groups of 5 or 6 to drum, to beat, to make music, or to congregate in general.
That is correct.
It also says that they had to have a pass, a passbook, to leave a plantation. So there was already mechanisms of control and prohibitive measures in place to prevent all kinds of association and freedoms being curtailed. Weapons being concealed within the quarters, if found with them, would result in 40-1, flogging, and again, repressive punishment. So the 1767 measures, slave codes, again reflect that kind of punitive punishment.
But it was intensified.
No, I'm not disagreeing. Now you want to see, if you want to go to a system of laws that reflect the intensification post-Loyalist arrival, go to the 1797 Comprehensive Slave Code. Man, they controlled everything. Like, for example, huskering, peddling on the street, the selling of spirituous liquors, playing at night and making a public nuisance, gathering in groups. All of those things were embedded in the 1797, why they call it comprehensive, because they want to make sure everything was covered.
And did you run across the one that says Junkanoo is a nuisance?
We're looking at that, yes.
I brought this to you. I'm hoping to find that, because if it does, we got to stop the hypocrisy. In our country, we're talking about Junkanoo is our national festival, is the most expressive cultural expression we have in the country, and no government of the day have the willingness or the intestinal fortitude to eradicate that if it does exist in our legislation.
Freddie and I are working on a piece on drumming.
Absolutely.
So we're going to look into
the history of drumming. You see, we got to stop the hypocrisy of our people. It's convenient for you to identify with somebody rushing down Bay Street. But when it comes to really accentuating where that came from West Africa. That came from our African ancestry.
As we are wrapping up in a little bit, I just want to make this point. Majority Rule Day is and has been politicized over the years. We're not going to discuss it at this time, but we need to say that. We need to say that Majority Rule Day was not brought about by any single entity in this country.
A white man was very prominent in that.
Not only was Sir Alvin Brennan very prominent,
and
but we had English people living here, and they were very supportive, albeit behind the scenes.
This is not a racial thing.
No, it has little to do with one party.
Stevenson.
And what we need the white people of this country to understand that this is not a black against white issue.
Absolutely.
Because whenever justice is done, we should all celebrate.
And that is the way they try to galvanize us and to divide us. Oh, it's a racial issue. You're putting the white Bahamians against. No, it has nothing to do about that. And it's not a political issue either.
Rights.
It was the rights of the people who rose up. Was no politician.
Achieved by people who have been deprived of those rights, we all should celebrate.
Absolutely. And I said that yesterday at QC. I say a Majority Rule Day is for all Bahamians, whether you're Filipino Bahamian, white Bahamian,
everybody.
Greek Bahamian, it's for all of us.
Those workers who were oppressed, no one asked them what political organization they belonged to. They were just oppressed.
But what we must do in coming to a rapid conclusion here, we must get our history out. I mean, I was saddened in a way, speaking to the entire family at C.R. Walker. A lot of them knew so little about C.R. Walker, the great man that he was. Perhaps one of the greatest Bahamians of the 20th century was Claudius Roland Walker. They were not aware. When we began to explain the importance of Baintown and Grantstown to the progress of this nation, when I told them, if you live in Baintown or Grantstown, you should be proud, they cheered. They cheered
but
because
they need to know
they have
that
been conditioned
they need to know
to
that
believe.
They need to know, CB, that they have that wonderful monument of him still sitting right there on Blue Hill Road.
That's right.
The Reinhardt Hotel.
Yes.
And the
They
reason
didn't know
why
where, they didn't know where it was.
not where it is, nor why he had to build it.
They didn't know where it
because
was.
his wife, who was an African American, her friends couldn't go and stay in nobody hotel.
Not
They had
only
to
that.
build a place
That's so right.
where
Not
they
only
had
that,
to.
if you had an event, a
Yes.
religious event, a
Right.
social event, your daughter got married, you could not go into the...
And
You,
so
you
this-
may not even realize this. I'll say this: the Reinhardt Hotel was the headquarters for the PLP
Okay,
in the
yes.
67 election.
Oh, but absolutely.
Okay, then.
He had a
So
newspaper
it brings
out
me
there.
back to my point, and I always plug this, particularly on occasions like this. Baintown must be declared as a historical community in this country, and then draw the University of the Bahamas into it and make it a Universityville, where we can then celebrate those monuments so that we can bring back the dignity of that historic
You have
community.
no
in this
idea what
country.
you're talking about.
Well on
That's
the way.
exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm talking to the
We have-
chairman
yeah.
of the history department.
Yes,
Well on the
yes,
way.
yes.
Huh?
You have no
That's
idea.
what has to happen.
Well on the way.
Well on your way.
Well
Yes.
on, and you could believe that.
That has
and
to happen,
we will
man.
not rest
And we will
until
bring
we see that
dignity back to that
realized.
community.
Exactly.
Where's the
We'll get
belly
our events.
of
So
our
we
historic
want to deal
history
with
and
our
culture.
events, and Chris is
Yes,
going
we
to-
have 3 events that are entirely non-political, meaning it is not politicized in any way. They're run by the university. We have an opening exhibition event on January 17th. Let me tell you what that. We are going to create in the galley of the Performing Arts Center of the university a living, moving, experiential exhibit. We're going to have sounds, taped speeches. We're going to have pictures, artwork, as well as blown up images from 58. We're going to have portraits. We're going to have news clips from the archives, all of that, and it's going to be in the Galley of the Performing Arts. That's the 17th of January from 10:30 to 12. We have a featured speaker in Glennis Hannah Martin, and we're also going to have school kids bust in. We have already contacted all of the schools. We actually have an essay competition associated with that event being run through the Ministry of Education, and our theme is the General Strike, 19 Days That Changed the Bahamas. Now, our second event is on January 23rd. This time it's in the evening from 6 to 8 p.m., and it's in the Performing Arts Center, and we're calling this Conversation with the Living Legends. We've actually found persons who are still alive, who are around during the period of the General Strike, who could actually talk about their memories and their experiences living through that. And we're going to have Dr. Tracy Thompson, who is an excellent interviewer. She's going to have them up on stage, and she's going to have an informal conversation, the living legends, so they can bring out their stories. And that's going to be on the 23rd. And then the following night, January 24th, we're going to have an event that is going to start at 7 p.m. at Workers' House. We've already booked Workers' House. We're going to have a forum where we're going to have labor leaders, current labor leaders, speaking about the significance of the general strike and the labor movement on the Bahamas. So those are our 3 events. We want the general public to attend, if possible, all 3. But if you can, at least choose one.
Well, that's fascinating. But on this Thursday, and we've got to go on Thursday, we are having a lecture, a free lecture, at the Bahamas Historical Society on majority rule. Listen, folks, it's at 6 o'clock. Chris, you're going to be there among us, but you must come. You must be there. Bahamas Historical Society, this Thursday, that's day after tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. And so let me thank you, Dr. Curry, for coming. Freddie, you're a regular on this show, so you don't need much
Always a
formal
pleasure,
thanks.
Reverend Dr. Moss.
And we are so grateful, folks, that you've taken a bit of your time this evening to be with us. We trust you enjoyed it. And we say, let's keep this discussion going of our history. Once we know who we are, because What did Marcus Garvey say? Or people who do not know their history and their culture is like a tree without roots. So, folks, good night and God bless you.
Only love can save us now.